It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Welcome back to another episode of Slashers in Sync. As you guys can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, we're not recording today. We're still trying to just figure out a section to record in, just because we have multiple styles of content. I'm also a tech YouTuber, and there's just a lot of different frames and shots that we want to get, and we're just trying to make it all work. So just for today, it's going to be audio only. So if you're listening to this on Apple Music or Spotify, y'all probably don't care.
Yeah.
but for the YouTube family, like, we're just, keeping it simple today, and we'll be back with video footage. This time I'm really gonna just focus on it. I'm gonna grab Marvin when she's off of work. She'll even remind me too. We're gonna sit down and get this shit fucking done. That way we can find a way to...
We have a solid stage.
Yeah.
We have a solid setup for you guys to see. Because I know we originally started off at our desks, and then we moved over to the couch. And then couch was working for a while. But, we also never really wanted to stay on the couch per se.
Yeah.
So I think MJ and I kind of had a similar idea for our next setup. We just have to mess around with it when time allows.
Yeah.
But for now, we're kind of going to kick it back to old school and just do audio for today's episode.
Exactly. So we're talking about Beetlejuice. You guys saw the thumbnail. Beetlejuice 2. Is that the actual title, Beetlejuice?
It's Beetlejuice,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to make sure. So yeah, we saw this film last night. It's right in our heads, but this episode will be dropping on Tuesday. So it'll be a few days out after we watched it. But as of this recording, we watched it last night, and phenomenal film. I can't believe we came from a point where Tim Burton said back in 2019 he doesn't ever think a sequel is going to happen.
Yeah.
And now we're here.
Yeah. I think the theory is that Brad Pitt kind of got this into motion because he loved Beetlejuice so much. And then that's what kind of led
familiar, yeah,
to the execution of the whole film and the start of the whole film. I mean, Tim Burton also dabbling his hands into Wednesday and a few other current live actions, I feel like helped progress the idea of us getting another sequel for Beetlejuice. So I thoroughly enjoy that.
Yeah, I actually... Yeah, I think you might be right. I just did a quick little research.
This was years ago too that it was announced that Brad Pitt was pitching the idea to a bunch of different studios of doing a second Beetlejuice. That he is a huge fan.
According to Screen Rant, this is back in 2022, so we don't know if things have changed. Maybe Tim Burton branched out on his own since then. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But Beetlejuice 2 is reportedly being produced by Brad Pitt's production company.
Yep.
So that's... I knew I had heard that. That sounded very familiar when you brought that up. But I don't know if things changed. But if it did stay with Brad Pitt's production company, thank you, Brad Pitt.
I know. He did a good job.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, Beetlejuice 2 opened with $41.5 million on its opening day. Third highest opening in 2024.
In general.
We then found out earlier today it outgrossed the first film's global total in just a few days.
I understand. Because I think the first movie came out in either the early 80s or the very late 70s.
It was 88.
88?
88, yeah.
Okay, so very late 80s.
So I think 34 years ago.
34 years about. And I liked it. I genuinely liked it.
I liked it too. I've seen mainly positive things. The only negative things I've seen is that it's not as good as the first film. That's the only negative thing I've seen. I haven't seen anyone shit on it.
Yeah, well, the first film was also out for about 3 decades.
Yeah, you're gonna have a lot of nostalgia eyes on it. So it's was it the nostalgia binoculars? You know what I mean? Goggles. You're gonna
be scrutinizing it.
For me, it's a little different because I watched the movie, the first one, years ago. I'm 30 now. I probably saw it when I was 9 or 10, and I didn't remember much about it. I just remember the movie kind of being like not my cup of tea at the time, or also just maybe being a little too gross, so I wouldn't watch it. I like to eat. This has been a thing since I was a kid. I like to eat when I watch movies. That's a very common thing for me, even back then.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what turned me off. But I rewatched it not too long ago. I think like a week ago with Marva, and I actually liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was like the best thing since sliced bread. I feel like I can bring up a bunch of 80 movies that I think are way better than that film. But regardless of that fact, I still liked it.
Mm-hmm.
So I watched it with very fresh eyes, and now I'm watching this one. I just watched it last night, and I told Marva straight up, I think it actually might be better than the first film.
As somebody who didn't grow up with the film,
Yeah, but who knows? I would have to rewatch them multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get into this later. Spoiler review on this. We're gonna go real deep into the film.
Yes.
So
if you haven't watched it, now's your chance to leave.
I will say this: the wedding scene at the end, it was epic. I think that's probably one of the best things Tim Burton has put to screen, live action, in years. I feel like that's up there with Batman. That's up there with like that scene, from the music to the acting to the choreography to the setting. Like it was good. It was epic, dude. Like I think that scene alone surpassed anything in the first Beetlejuice film, that wedding scene. But anyways, we'll get into that, later. Let's go ahead and start off with the opening of this film. It starts with like an overhead / like drone sequence of the town sculpture from the first film. Yeah. I believe the guy's name was Adam, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Adam Maitland.
It was a similar like opening to the first one where you get to see the miniature city as well, the miniature sculpture, which I liked.
I don't know if this is what they were going for, but it almost kind of seemed like it was an opening for Lydia's TV show.
Yeah. So
it went into...
It went into a home, I think, and then it expanded on... Like, once you went inside the window, you then saw the footage that was being played on Lydia's reality TV show or her show.
Yeah, so it was almost like an intro for the film, but also an intro for Lydia's TV show. I thought that was kind of dope.
I don't think the miniature homes are a part of it. I think it was us just transitioning over to how Lydia's life is like almost 30 years after her leaving the quote-unquote ghost house.
Yeah.
Which I liked. I thought it was a smooth transition. And seeing Lydia on the spot was really interesting.
Yeah, because as we just said, she is a host for a show called Ghost House, and she visits homes that the owners claim to be haunted. Very Paranormal Activity-esque with like the filter, like the screen.
Yeah, and camera. It had like a very like sitcom-ish, like Jimmy Fallon. It
even looked like back in the day too, even though they're very much in 2023, 2024.
The setting of it all together, which I mean, who knows? Maybe like sitcoms and like live audience shows are still the same. It's just different screens and things along those lines. But it was interesting to see Lydia on the spot interacting with people and actually like being a little different than the Lydia I was used to seeing.
This is a girl that never talked to anybody.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see that. She sees Beetlejuice for a split second in the crowd, which causes her to almost have like a panic attack on television. Like she just starts freaking out in front of everybody.
Yeah.
It does not click in her mind that she's live right now. No. So she immediately is just...
They do like a commercial break. She ducks back behind scenes and then she runs to her manager, who we come to find out is not just her manager. It's also her boyfriend. And this guy...
I didn't like him from the start.
I did not either. He seemed like a cartoon character, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Very animated, very over the top, very expressive, and almost like an enablist. And I picked up on it very quickly. Yeah. But I also told myself, you know what? Let's take it with a grain of salt. I don't know what's going on. Maybe they're not really together. Because like he was saying some corny and some weird-ass lines in the beginning. And I don't know what the fuck he was on, if anything, but at the same time it didn't feel genuine.
When he threw her pills into the trash can and then took them out and then immediately threw it in her mouth, I was just like...
And also put one in his own mouth.
Yeah, I was like, all right, dog. But...
And apparently he's done it before, too.
Yeah, he said it was the last time he does it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like kudos to the actor for pulling off a character like that, but it's just... I don't know, man. I feel like I could have did without him in the film.
Yeah. I mean, we cut out a certain point that's a little important. Once she gets backstage, she kind of goes to the bathroom and she's grabbing a bottle of pills, and those bottle of pills apparently like suppress her psychic abilities and so on and so forth. But
Yeah, because she sees a ghost in there too.
yeah, she sees a lot of ghosts. I guess whatever she did in movie one's kind of like impacted her for the rest of her life. But her manager or her boyfriend, I guess, is just really fucking weird.
During this point when like they're hugging or he's like on top of her, like kissing her and shit, like
At least trying to.
She gets bombarded with texts from Delia, her stepmother from the first film, and it is played by the same actress. I was happy to see that.
Yeah, a lot of the original cast were called back.
I think most of the original cast is like still alive. I don't think anyone's passed on yet. It's just some have done some things that didn't allow them to come back, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Delia seems to be like a very successful person in the industry now, as opposed to the first film where everyone that she tried to like, I guess, befriend seemed to treat her as a joke. Like that her sculptures weren't shit, her art wasn't anything, she wasn't a visionary.
Yeah. She was just being weird, like trying to be different. Like
persistent or kind of like, you know, what's the word that they when like higher ups kind of look down at you for trying to be persistent, they think you're being like pushy or something, you know.
They were very condescending towards her. Now she seems to almost like demand the attention and demand like the audience that's around her.
Yeah, she seems very well off now. She has her own money, it seems, like, you know, she's making it big. And she's frantic. She's going crazy and screaming in her own workplace. And she informs Lydia when she gets there that her father has passed away during his bird watching trip. Because if y'all remember, he liked to bird watch. He only did it like a couple of times in the original film, but I guess they made it more of a part of his character here. Yeah. And I'm not going to get into the whole Jeffrey Jones real life situation. That's not really our stuff here. But the death of Charles being in a stop motion was pretty damn cool. I liked it. I liked the callback to the stop motion. I liked seeing like a current day version of stop motion animation versus the nostalgic ones what I'm used to watching growing up, and like still to this day too. So I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I kind of thought maybe like the original actor had passed or something had happened. I mean, you and I both found out exactly what happened a couple hours before we sat down to record this. Yeah, I looked it up because I hadn't heard of Jeffrey Jones in a minute. Like, he's more of an older actor from what I remember. So I had to look up what was going on with him, and a lot of stuff. Not going to get into it on this, but not necessarily the best guy. But the way that they handled it was pretty interesting because when Delia's explaining the story of how I guess Charles passed, she says that he survived a plane crash. It was just the fact that like he was in the water floating and a shark came and ate him. And like fast forward into a little bit like further down, maybe 30 minutes into the film, we see which half survives. Yeah. It almost kind of came off like a rib, like she was fucking with Lydia. Yeah. Like when she was explaining the story. Yeah. Like it seemed a little outlandish. Yeah. But that was also the tone of the entire film too. Because remember, like the idea was, no, it wasn't the plane crash that killed him. Oh, that's so sad. He drowned. No, it wasn't that he drowned. It's just, he survived the water. He came back up. He was floating on a piece of the airplane. It's just that a shark came and, ate him. Yeah. Sorry. At one point, one of Delia's employees who had just been like screaming in the background, like pissed off or something. I think it was somebody that she had hired, like a well-known French artist, and she had brought to her show. But after receiving the news, she had to cancel the show. Yeah. And so this guy was like throwing a temper tantrum, according to her. He falls into a sewer as he stormed off and out of her office, and this leads us into the afterlife because the poor dude died. Yep. Like he fell far. Like that was a far ass drop. Like that was a heavy drop. You can hear him like echoing as he's falling. And we're introduced to Dolores, who sucks the soul out of a nearby janitor because the dumbass accidentally, I guess, brought her body parts back to life when he was... Yeah, he was trying to polish the floor. And mind you, we get introduced to the janitor because this artist is like looking for where to go. And that's where, as an audience member, you're in the afterlife because of the fact that the buildings and the walls and the structures look very familiar to the original Beetlejuice film. Yeah. So like this janitor is just trying to polish the floors and seems to get electrocuted whenever he electrocutes himself. The boxes in that room also get electrocuted too. And that was a pretty gnarly scene. I liked it. Together. It was almost like a Frankenstein scene. Yes. But this time the person is like putting themselves back together. Yes. So she's grabbing this like industrial stapler and like stapling herself back piece by piece, and seeing that happen was pretty cool too because all the body parts were moving like very lifelike. They didn't seem fake. We almost get introduced to the idea that we've yet to see like someone who has dealt with supernatural forces
Yeah.
die and
Yeah.
then come back in the afterlife. I think she's one of the first that we see, like someone who was a part of a cult, someone who was very, drinking blood, doing sacrifices, like someone who did
Witchcraft-esque.
witchcraft-esque, die and then come back in the afterlife. That was like, you could almost kind of see the difference between her and the others, and the way she utilized her aura, her powers, if you will.
Yeah, because I think that's either then or a little further down the film we finally get
the backstory of her.
The backstory of her, where she comes from, who she is, and so on and so forth.
So now there seems to be like a task force implemented in the afterlife, which William Dafoe is playing the captain of. So, and we heard that he was going to be in the film.
Yeah.
He got casted in it.
Yeah.
An all-star cast at the time. I remember when it was coming out, it was Dafoe, Jenna Ortega. Like, okay, this is going to be
big.
Yeah. So
and it was.
It was, yeah. He's playing the captain, and they're after Dolores, who seems to have some ties to a former person we know. But the scene cuts back to the living, where we see Lydia's daughter Astrid and her life. Jenna Ortega gets introduced to this movie a little, I don't want to say late, but it's at least like 20 minutes in.
20 minutes in.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Delia and Lydia are driving to Astrid's school.
Yes.
Lydia is calling Astrid, trying to get a hold of her, and we see Astrid continuously like just ignoring her calls and her text messages.
Yeah.
However, whenever we finally cut to Astrid, she's in an all-girls school. It almost looks like a boarding school, or like a version of, I guess, the academy that she goes to or Jenna Ortega goes to for Wednesday. All the girls are in uniform. They all seem to be around the same age, but Astrid also seems to be the target of a bunch of bullies. So we see a bunch of girls like grouped up on the top of the stairway. Astrid is doing her best to get to her dormitory. When she opens the door, quote unquote ghost, it's like a prank, swings up in front of her, and like these group of girls just start hysterically laughing. And Lydia says like some sort of really funny and like witty remark, but also the kind that throws everybody off.
You mean Astrid?
Or I'm sorry, yeah, Astrid. But once Astrid is in her room, Delia and Lydia make it to the school.
Yeah.
But they don't park. They're in like the court area or the front of the school. And like Lydia keeps calling
This is so embarrassing.
Astrid's not picking up. So then Delia jumps out of the car and literally screams, Astrid, stop torturing your mother, stop like ignoring your mother, like your grandfather's dead. But she's saying this while she's outside of the school, outside of the dormitory, with just the door like for the car open, and she's walking in front of the car screaming this out for the entire school to hear.
As she's talking, you're seeing more people come to the windows, like,
opening it up.
Yeah.
People stopping while they're going to class, like, and Astrid's just standing there taking all this in, and I'm getting secondhand embarrassment while sitting in the audience.
Yeah, like that was, I can't even imagine that, bro.
Myself.
She already had a target on her back, and it kind of makes sense because it's not like Lydia is like a rapper or like an actress. She's someone who has a ghost house show, which a lot of people probably believe it to be fake. You know? So it makes sense why Astrid would get picked on so heavily. But
a cool detail that I've noticed around the second shot whenever Astrid finally comes downstairs is that the school that Astrid is going to is named Dietz.
Yeah.
So I guess the Dietz family like really makes a name for themselves during these last like 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And this either they make a donation or the school is built because of them. One of the two.
They mentioned like the entire art program is because of
Delia.
Delia. So yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it makes sense.
But once Astrid comes down, Lydia drops the bomb that the family is going back to the vacation house, the original house from Beetlejuice, to have the memorial and to pack everything that belonged to Charles.
Yeah.
So we're getting this information, and we're also finding out a little bit of tidbits about like what's going on between Lydia and Astrid, but it's kind of interrupted because Lydia then sees Beetlejuice for the second time.
Yeah.
And this time she sees him in the form of like just someone with a Halloween outfit that looks similar to the outfit he had on back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So she freaks out. That of course disrupts everything, that whatever moment they were about to have disrupts that. And that's when we cut to the afterlife. And we
This
see Beetlejuice this time. We're reintroduced to Beetlejuice. He's kind of doing what he did before, the whole exorcism thing, but this time he has a whole staff with him. I guess
the shrunken heads.
Yeah, from the help of the shrunken head from the first film.
I wonder what happened to them. Well, we'll get to that in a bit.
Because didn't Beetlejuice get his head shrunk too at the very end of the last film?
He got his head shrunk, so he has a whole bunch of like underlings that are head shrunk folk. But he has a loyal one by the name of Bob. I think it's the one that we get introduced to in the first film. And Beetlejuice seems to have like almost a call center, if you will.
Yes.
And he's still running the whole bit of like being a bioexorcist.
Yeah.
And I think you mentioned it that at this point in time, we also hear that Beetlejuice has been trying to get to Lydia for years, and it's only been as of recent that he actually feels he's made a connection to her.
The last like couple of times, which is the time of the school and then the time at Lydia's show. So
yeah, and he still has a photo of her when she was young, so you can still see that like he's quote unquote hung up. But I don't know, like before we cut away from Dolores, I don't know if you mentioned earlier, but Dolores seems to have some sort of like weird obsession over Beetlejuice, and we don't know why. And Beetlejuice was like really adamant on getting married in the first film. So again, we don't know why, but I guess this film answers that question.
Yeah, because when this happens, Beetlejuice has to report to the main office where he has to grab a ticket, do all that shit, sits down, and then he comes across William Dafoe's character, who I guess replaced the woman from the first film. I can't remember what they called her. Was she like a
I think she was
afterlife something, right?
She was the person who wrote the handbook for people who have passed.
Yeah. So I don't know if Willem Dafoe replaced her or if he's just like the stand-in for her in this film. I don't know, but he seems to be handling a lot of like all the funky shit that's happening in the afterlife.
And mind you, he wasn't a cop before he died. He was just an actor who played a cop when he died. And the reason why he died is that he refused to have a stunt double. He did his own stunts. Yeah. So a stunt went wrong and
very
he passed.
Tom Cruise-esque.
Very, very Tom Cruise-esque. So William's character is just running around trying to figure, been placed on the assignment of figuring out like Dolores's whereabouts, why she's out, how she came out, and who she's made contact to. He comes in contact with Beetlejuice, and
we kind of get to see them go back and forth. Like, this is where we get the story of, or not fully the story, but we get to see the ties that she has with Beetlejuice. She's coming after him because she wrote Beetlejuice in that dude's blood or ectoplasm or whatever, right?
Yeah,
like
I think it was the second person that she soul sucked.
She like wrote something in
Beetlejuice's mind,
and he had them there. And I will say this is one of my critiques of this film. A lot of Willem Dafoe's and Michael Keaton's performances in here, when they're together, you're supposed to laugh. Like, they're being comedic. Like, it's a guy who you can't take him seriously versus Beetlejuice, and they're having like back and forths. I don't think this movie is that funny. I feel like there was some lines that get dropped that are kind of okay. I laughed a little bit, but it's definitely not as funny as the first one. Yeah. Even though this still is marketed as a comedy horror film. So that is maybe one of the critiques for it. I just feel like a lot of the jokes didn't really land.
They kind of fell flat.
At least for me. I don't know. What do you think?
Some did, some didn't. I was extremely tired when we went and watched it, so I think like I need to watch it a second time to really find out and see if I will laugh or not. But I've also noticed a certain trend with Tim Burton films, at least for me. The more I watch it, the more I enjoy it. The first time I watch it, I don't necessarily get the best impression on the film. So if it starts off strong, that means the more I keep watching it, the more I'm going to fall in love with it and like get obsessed. Yeah. I.e. like Nightmare Before Christmas.
So once at the ghost house, which is the original house from the first film, Asher starts walking around and just asking questions with Lydia answering them. We're starting to see them talk more. So this whole idea that they haven't been on speaking terms in like months or whatever, like now they're at least talking, but it makes sense.
Trying to rekindle things.
Because it makes sense. They're at, her grandpa and her father's funeral. So,
Charles's house.
Yeah.
They have like this like weird mourning sash all over the house too, which Delia mentions that it's, the house is a memory of Charles, and it's like essentially Charles's place because she never really wanted the house. So this is a way for them to all say goodbye to everything, not just Charles, but what's inside at the home itself.
So we then see
Astrid coming across the attic. And
did that happen before or after the guy tried talking to her?
Jeremy?
No, the boyfriend.
No, that was at the memorial service. So Astrid is like exploring the house beforehand.
Okay.
And she comes across the attic, and she's there. She's kind of like figuring things out, because I think Lydia and Astrid were having a conversation downstairs, and Lydia mentioned that this is the house that essentially started her whole like supernatural experiences coming to play, and so on and so forth. And that
we should also make note. It's very important, guys, is that Astrid does not believe the ghost stuff.
No,
that happens. It happened when we were talking about the when they were gonna have a moment. You know, because she can't see her father.
Yeah,
she can't see her
Lydia
ex-husband.
can't see.
Yeah. So that makes her almost come off as a fraud. And then I think when they got there, she mentioned that the Maitlands had moved on. They found a loophole and were able, because remember, they were trying to leave, and I think that woman from the first film told them, you need to be at that house for like X amount of years, or you need to like do something for X amount of years. And I guess they found a loophole and were able to move on. So the Maitlands aren't there to prove that Lydia is telling the truth either.
Exactly.
So around this time, like, that's going on, and
there's a lot of tension being built between the two. And I guess Astrid gets curious to even see like what's going on with the little miniature houses upstairs. So she goes up, finds the attic, and we see the same miniature model. And all of a sudden a flyer pops up out of there. And it's a very familiar flyer for the audience members, but Astrid sees it and just kind of like tosses it to the side and doesn't really think much of it. This is when Lydia comes up and finds Astrid in the attic, and they're having their moment there. But when Lydia sees the flyer that Beetlejuice had, she freaks out again, shoves Astrid out, chains up the attic, and like is shown coming down with like some sort of like weird breathing technique. And this is where like Astrid just seems like overly upset, really just fed up, and just leaves the place for a little bit. I don't think we know where exactly to, but she just leaves for a little bit.
I think we might have mixed it up, because the very first time she meets Jeremy, she's leaving the memorial. I think whenever she finds that attic and the scene you're talking about now, that's when she goes and sees him the second time. And that's when before he invites her to Halloween and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because remember, he meets her a second time, and that's when he says, you can come over later, we'll have pizza and candy.
Yeah. Sorry.
She doesn't want to be there for the wedding.
Yeah. So I guess it didn't really cut into this part where Astrid's exploring the house. It then cut to the memorial service itself.
Yes.
Sorry, guys.
No, you're good. We just watched this movie last night.
Yeah, and it was only one.
It was only one.
So I guess rewind. We kind of jump forward. So I guess jumping back to once we cut from Beetlejuice back into the living world, we see the memorial service, and it's a really cool memorial service. Yeah. It's very like artsy. It seems like something that Delia of today would put together.
Okay, I needed to ask you this, because I might have been a little out of it because I was tired as well. But were the people who were singing at Charles' funeral singing the Deo song?
Yeah.
8 foot.
Whenever he was being like placed into the ground. I mean, he also really enjoyed the whole experience of being possessed, so that also explains why he was okay with it.
Yeah,
or I guess
he likes that song too. So.
Yeah, so I guess that whole song was, if you know, you know, and if you don't, then you just think it was his favorite song. And the family wasn't necessarily too religious, so I wouldn't think the kids would sing like some sort of religious choir song.
Yeah. But yeah, I was confused in the theater, and I was like, is this the Deo song? I can't like fully understand them, but I did feel like I heard 6 foot, 7 foot somewhere in there. So.
Yeah, it was the Deo song. They were just singing like a choir-esque voice.
This song is sprinkled a lot throughout this film. So if you're a fan of that moment from the first film, you're going to like this.
You are. And I guess once we cut to the memorial service, everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. Astrid is off to the corner eating some of the snacks. Lydia's just kind of walking around, and Delia's surrounded by people. And this is where we see the weird boyfriend.
I hated this scene, man. It was so awkward.
Astrid have a quote-unquote moment. And this guy is just essentially like trying to connect with Astrid, saying that whenever his grandfather died, mind you, his grandfather passed whenever this guy was only 4 or 5, so he barely remembers anything, that he was also really sad, and so on and so forth. And Astrid just calls him out on his bullshit. And he's just like, you know what? You and I are never going to really get along, so just essentially, like, I'm just summarizing the whole vibe.
This whole like new age emotional male shit does not work for me. I know like what you are.
Yeah. So essentially, just leave me alone and we'll be okay. And this guy like turns on his heel and walks off. Then I guess.
Oh, this scene sucks, dude. I'm gonna let you tell it, but you can tell he was rattled by that.
Yeah.
And knowing what he is by the end of the film, which we'll get into later, now we know why he did that. He wanted to stick it to her.
Yeah.
He wanted to say, fuck you. Like, I'm the one who's in control here. I'm going to let you talk about it. But this scene that this dude fucking pulls at the dad's wake is... Go ahead.
Yeah, so this guy, I don't even remember his name. That's how much I don't like him, and I don't really need to know his name. He's Lydia's boyfriend. I'm just going to leave it at that. Like, bitch boy. I'll call him bitch boy.
Manager or boyfriend, whichever.
Manager boyfriend. MB. How about that? So MB...
Not to be confused with BM.
Yeah. MB decides to pull a whole stunt, pulls Lydia close, and wants to do a speech. Delia also really does not seem to like MB at all.
I fucks with that.
Which I love.
Yeah.
Because Delia was almost shown as the antagonist for the first movie. So by her pulling that stunt, I was like, nope, she's no antagonist this time. She's great.
Yeah.
She tells MB, like, stop it. No public speeches. I don't need this. And MB is persistent on delivering whatever speech he wants. But we come to find out it's not about Charles. He is announcing that he wants to get married to Lydia, and it's going to be in 2 days. And in 2 days, it's going to be Halloween. He wants to get married on Halloween at the witching hour at 12 a.m.
Yeah.
Lydia is put on the spot. She's trying to figure out what to do, what to say, and you can tell, or at least I feel like I could tell, that she was very hesitant. And in my mind, if I'm hesitant in marrying somebody, that means it's a no.
Yeah.
But she didn't say no. She said yes. Astrid, rightfully so, gets upset, storms off, gets on her bike, and is just riding through town. And we see the iconic scene that was constantly played in the trailers.
Yes.
Leading up to the movie being released of Jenna Ortega on the bike, riding through the small town that Beetlejuice took place in. But
I like this shot too, because it wasn't like an overhead drone shot. It was like, you could tell they either like had the camera attached to the bike, or they had it they
had it planted throughout the city.
Yeah, it was very dope, and I liked how we got to see the entire city again, but now in 2024.
Yeah,
we saw that the hardware store that Adam, I guess, frequently went to, because that guy knew him who sat outside the store, was actually now like a coffee shop or something. So
yeah, everything's kind of changed.
Yeah,
we kind of get an update of how the town's been like since the Dietz family has left, and I guess Astrid nearly dies on multiple occasions in this ride. Like,
they were teasing the Adam Maitland shit with his wife, like that she was gonna die like on the way out into town or something, you know?
Essentially, right? So truck nearly hits her. She nearly like crashes into a bunch of people. Nearly crashes into like post boxes and things along those lines. And as she's like skating by on the skin of her teeth, she eventually like loses control and hits a fence, breaks through the fence, goes down the hill, and ends up in the front yard of these people who own a home.
Yeah.
She takes notice that one of these trees has like a tree house, and this guy's like looking over and looking at her, and she profusely starts apologizing. He comes down, has like a book in his hand, and the two of them connect on the book. She throws a line from the book itself, and the guy, Jeremy, ends up like finding an interest in her, if you will. They talk for a little moment, but then I guess Astrid kind of breaks off and goes back home, and then that leads to her exploring the home, inquiring about like the house itself, and Lydia opening up about her experiences with the ghosts in the very beginning and the miniature home, and then that leads to what I was mentioning earlier of like Astrid being upstairs, finding the flyer, Lydia also coming across the flyer, and then...
Because I think what really pisses Astrid off in that moment is she's looking through the book, right, with pictures of her dad and her mom.
This like little collage.
And again, they're about to have a moment, but then the whole... She mentions Beetlejuice, and that her saying just at one time freaks Lydia out so much that it almost causes a fight.
Yeah.
And that's when she storms out again. So it's like...
Astrid almost like says it again to just kind of like tease it and see what the fuck would happen, but Lydia nearly has the breakdown. I feel like if Lydia let Astrid say it a third time, then Astrid would have just left it alone. But rightfully so, she didn't want her daughter in danger, so she freaked out, and Astrid storms off, and she goes and sees Jeremy once again.
Yeah.
And this time, Jeremy invites her over for Halloween.
I do like... Lydia like really being on her toes with it, because she should be aware. I'm sure she remembers what happened that night.
Yeah.
That Beetlejuice will try and like once you bring him out, he'll put fucking tape, metal. He'll staple your lips so you don't say it. So I'm sure she didn't want to take the chance. Like, I'm sure she would have loved to have proved her daughter wrong, but she wasn't gonna put her in danger over that. So I did appreciate that.
That motherly instinct came into play. She wasn't like being all cold and whatnot. And I think the reason why Jeremy even like invites Astrid over is because Astrid is talking about how she's like thinks this wedding is like a sham, doesn't even want to go.
It's gonna ruin her holiday.
Yeah, and how she really likes Halloween, and that her and her father really connected over Halloween.
Yeah, and then I believe once we're missing, I think, a couple of things. I think throughout some of this, we're cutting in and out back to the afterlife, where we see Charles walking into like the
check-in desk.
The check-in desk.
And we finally see which half survived.
Yes,
it's the bottom half.
Yes,
I thought was really interesting.
We see like Willem Dafoe like running around doing his little shtick as an actor / cop. You know,
yeah, Dolores is still going around sucking people's souls, and we also get like a little backstory of Dolores around this time where we're introduced to the idea of her being part of this like weird group, this weird cult where they're all known as the Soul Suckers, and like she William Dafoe actually connects with Beetlejuice because he's like, hey, you know, she wrote out your name on the wall, so I'm trying to figure out how the connection will be. And this is where Beetlejuice dives into the history that Dolores and him share, which is that he fell in love with her, and she fell in love with him. They got married, and to finally like quote unquote seal the deal, she had to suck his soul, but not after like embellishing in the fact that they were recently married and having a honeymoon night, if you will. Beetlejuice freaks out, ends up like dying, I guess, or no, he ends up chopping her up, and once he ends up chopping her up, that's whenever he just kind of breaks off. And he kind of makes a side comment saying that this is one of the reasons, like, we essentially pick up as an audience member that this is one of the reasons why he was so adamant on marrying Lydia. Because if he married somebody else, whatever ties and whatever contract he had to Dolores would fall off.
Not just that, but doesn't he, that's like his way into the real world, right? I think. Or something. Didn't someone mention that?
I think so. I'm not too sure.
I think somebody mentioned that was his way into
that was his way of being more solidified. He wouldn't be put away off into a corner in the afterlife. He would have more power.
Yeah, he wouldn't be locked away like he is, like by his name, I guess, if you will.
I don't think he would be walking amongst the living, but I do think he would be walking more freely in the afterlife.
He'd be like a Willem Dafoe, like a regular ghost again. Because I don't know, like, I think the woman from the first film like sealed him away or did something, right?
Did something to where he's like bound to his name, but people need to say his name 3 times to bring him back, or say something else 3 times to counter it.
But all of this is happening and we're cutting back and forth. I do think we see Dolores suck out another soul too, where she gets the wedding dress and she turns it black. So that's exactly what you would do. Yeah. Turn a wedding dress black if you had that power.
Yeah, she was like looking for Beetlejuice throughout this entire time, mind you. And again, like you mentioned, she gets her wedding dress because she wants to seal the deal, if you will. And
we're also introduced to Bob, who now looks exactly like Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it cuts back because after William Dafoe's visit, Beetlejuice finds out that no, Dolores is really like on his case and really trying to find him. So
yeah, it's not a joke anymore. So.
No, so he has Bob, his most loyal and trusted shrunken head, dress up like him, while Beetlejuice goes off to try and figure out a way to deter Dolores.
Yeah,
and this is where the movie picks up even more. Come Halloween night, we get introduced to Astrid again, but Astrid seems to be, instead of riding her bike to Jeremy's house, is being dropped off by Lydia this time.
Yeah.
And Astrid goes in, she's hanging out with Jeremy, and you can tell there's chemistry between the two of the characters. Like, the two of them are very interested in each other, and then all of a sudden you get cut back to Lydia, and Lydia's back at the ghost house, and we get introduced to the real estate agent that was in the original film. This time she's married, she has a child, and we saw her at the memorial service, don't get me wrong, but this time she seems to be talking to Lydia about like how she's going to sell the home and everything, and then how Astrid is on her first date.
And somebody from that area and she mentions like the name of the street. And she freaks out, the real estate agent, because
she has been trying to sell this property for decades and has been like unsuccessful.
The one, like, I guess, blemish on her record.
Yeah.
And she kind of freaks out a little bit, Lydia. So then she asks, like, she names the street.
Yeah.
And she's like, she freaks out too when she names the street, right? And then it just kind of unfolds. She mentions that someone by the name Jeremy Fraser killed his parents.
Mm-hmm.
and then ran into the treehouse. And when the cops tried to bring him down, he
fell on his neck.
Fell and broke his neck.
Yeah, but mind you, right before we get this whole explanation from the real estate agent, we have Jeremy tell Astrid that he was constantly being ignored by his parents, and one day just decides to go up to his treehouse and ends up falling on his neck and dying just because of shits and giggles. So me being like not necessarily having the best idea of Jeremy, immediately fell and said, yes, no, the real estate agent is right. And this is where Lydia starts to panic. Mind you, the second time that Astrid is at Jeremy's place, she finds the handbook guide of people who have recently passed or have recently deceased. And Jeremy makes this comment about finding the book in a yard sale, which it was weird. Because at first in the beginning, I thought, okay, well, maybe like Delia had somebody sell some of like the really, really old stuff that was in the house. But looking back at it now, they didn't touch the home until Charles passed. So him getting it at the yard sale was probably a huge tell that he's not telling the truth.
See, I thought maybe, I can't remember the guy's name, but he played the guy who was friends with Delia in the first film.
The designer, the interior designer.
I thought that maybe he had held on to it and like sold it, or it kind of got lost. Like,
no, the main ones ended up getting it back.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But then I thought, actually, I think I remember in the first film they straight up say you only get this when you're dead. So nobody should have that unless. Yeah, I think maybe the book probably like disappears too after after
you move on.
So it raised a lot more questions once you put that together. That does not make any sense.
Yeah, and maybe it was my fault for not picking it up because while I've seen the Beetlejuice movie more, the original one in '88, I haven't seen it enough to like know it like the back of my hand.
But to play devil's advocate, you and I both thought, okay, something's not right with him.
Yeah,
we knew something was wrong. I think I had already thought he was a ghost too. I just didn't realize he was going to be an antagonist ghost.
Yeah. So I guess after that scene, we get cut back to Astrid and Jeremy having their moment and they're kissing, and then the camera shoots out and we come to find out that Jeremy and Astrid are floating, and this is where Jeremy drops the bomb that, hey, I am a ghost. Like, I'm so happy that you could see me. It's been a while since like anybody has been able to see me. Right before, he also introduces Astrid to his family, to his mom and his dad. Neither one of them like turn around to say hello fully, which I thought was like pretty interesting. But if he was playing the whole story of having a very dysfunctional family, then I guess that kind of like made sense. And it was another way of like him weaseling his way into Astrid's like good side, if you will. So he then looks to Astrid and says like, hey, if you help me out and if you read out this passage, then I'll be able to help you not only see your dad, but you and I will actually be able to be together. Which is smart because she's not informed by any of this. She doesn't believe her mom, even if her mom did tell her about it. Yep. So she even makes the comment that the book seems to be like something that Lydia would write. And it's very interesting because when we first saw the drawing the door and creating the door into the afterlife, it was with two dead people. Mm-hmm. So for him to make that comment, since I'm dead, I can just walk in, but since you're alive, you have to say this. I thought that was a very interesting way to get her to read a cantation, and that we don't really know about yet. You know? So I thought that was cool. We see the glowing lights that we're familiar with, and around this time, like Lydia is in her car and already like at the house that she had dropped her daughter off. She doesn't make it in time, but whenever she runs in, she grabs the book. She runs in and she grabs the book, but not without actually seeing the state of how Jeremy's parents are, with like a tool being lodged in his father's face and like a hand mixer being lodged in his mother's face. And I think she like slips into Jeremy's room just in time to see the brick door close, but she grabs the handbook and runs off. Yeah. She then runs up to the attic, unlocks all the chains that she did earlier, goes into the room, and calls out for Beetlejuice. And he comes up. Yeah. And we finally get to see Lydia and Beetlejuice interact for the first time in the film. Still wants to marry her. Still wants to marry her, brings out a contract, has a lot of fucking fine print, gets her to sign, but Lydia says that the main condition is that he has to help save her daughter. And they go on a mission. Yes. And this is where the afterlife really comes into play. Before Astrid crosses over, Delia mentions that she's going to do some form of ceremony at Charles's grave.
Yeah.
and post it and make it part of the exposition that she wants to do of her grief and of her sorrow.
Yeah.
And she imports 2 snakes that supposedly have been defamed. She does the ceremony. She passes, and she also crosses over to the afterlife. So at this point in time, all the Dietz women are in the afterlife.
One way or the other.
In one way or another. You have Astrid and Jeremy running through, and Astrid is feeling worse and worse, while Jeremy allegedly is feeling better and better.
Yeah.
And they reach a certain point to where Jeremy essentially drops the bomb and says, hey, that incantation that I had you read, it was for us to swap places. I'm going to come back to life, but you're going to stay in the afterlife. And you see, right when he drops the bomb, Astrid gets escorted to the Soul Train.
I hated Tim Burton for that so much, bro.
I thought it was so corny, but I loved it still.
Yeah.
And it felt very like Beetlejuice and Tim Burton-esque.
Yeah.
So as Astrid is being escorted, Lydia and Beetlejuice seem to be like a step or two behind.
They're also trying to evade the task force because Willem Dafoe and them found out that multiple people who are alive are now in the afterlife,
and they're really not supposed to be.
They're not supposed to be.
And Dolores is out here trying to find Beetlejuice. So Beetlejuice is not only running from William, but also running from Dolores, and Lydia's running from William and trying to beat Jeremy to make sure that her daughter
there's a
is
lot
like
going on.
Being okay. And then you also have Delia on the side not being able to fully comprehend the fact that she actually has died.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things going on at this point in time, but as Astrid is being escorted to the Soul Train, the final portion of it, she comes across her dad. And her dad is like somebody who works at the ticket booth.
Yes.
But she can't really stop to say anything. She is gets thrown onto the Soul Train. Everybody's dancing on there. And I was convinced at this point in time that the doors for the Soul Train were going to close. Lydia somehow shows up, catches up to Astrid, pulls her out. And now they need to figure out a way to get back to the living.
Good point on seeing the doors closed because they mentioned the Great Beyond before in the first film.
They did.
I thought we were going to see it in this one.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to go there, then there would be a loophole to bring Astrid back.
But I think if you go to the Great Beyond, then that's it.
If there's a third one, we'll probably see it in that one.
Probably.
Yeah.
But essentially, I guess, like...
I think once Lydia grabs Astrid out of the train, and then that's when their father comes and Astrid's father comes and helps them out. That's when we cut back to Delia, who really can't fathom that she's dead, and she calls Beetlejuice for help because this whole entire time she's screaming for I know people because she seems to be very powerful and rich in the real world when she was alive. So the only person that she knows in the afterlife is Beetlejuice. So she calls him. And then this is where, and I told you this right after the theater, the film kind of gets a little muddy to me because I feel like, because Beetlejuice's connection or deal with Delia is, I'll help you with this whole situation and find Charles and everything as long as you help me find my bride-to-be.
Yeah.
I just feel like you don't need Delia to have Beetlejuice find her. Like, I feel like, I just feel like there was too much going on. Because
there was a lot.
You had the dad going after Astrid and Lydia. You had Astrid and Lydia trying to escape the Soul Train. You had Beetlejuice escaping Dolores and Willem Dafoe. You had Willem Dafoe looking for both the alive girls. And then you had now Delia working with Beetlejuice to help Beetlejuice find the chick he just lost like 2 minutes ago. I think it got a little too much there. I feel like you could have just kept Delia alive and have her meet up with everyone at the wedding.
Yeah.
You know?
But, I mean, the story took the route that it did, and it's fine. I guess that also... The chaos also leads to the comedy, if you will, because there was, like, some moments where Delia and Beetlejuice were having, like, weird exchanges. But Beetlejuice does find Astrid, does find Lydia, and this is where Astrid's father... Like, before all this, Astrid's father has a moment with both Lydia and... Astrid and says, like, look, like, I was there. I was just making sure I wouldn't be seen because I didn't want to cause a rift between the two of you. But it seems like there already is a rift between the two of you. Like, please promise me that won't be the case moving forward, and so on and so forth. And that's when I guess he kind of pieces together that Jeremy is trying to go back. So in order to make sure that doesn't happen, he is on the mission now to stop him from getting his passport stamped.
Yes.
Jeremy, at least.
And they make it very close. Like, they're right there.
Yeah.
The dad yells out to
the worker
to don't stamp that. Jeremy looks and says, too late. And then we see the workers actually
Beetlejuice. But the funny thing is, this passport gets stamped shit out of luck.
Yeah.
And the floor opens up and Jeremy falls to a pit full of fire. And Beetlejuice held his end of the bargain. Delia also helped Beetlejuice get to his, loved one, and Delia. All of them get snapped back to reality. And all of them are in the gravesite. But the gravesite also leads to a church, and this is a church that Lydia is supposed to have her wedding at. Astrid is back because Jeremy is now gone. The father says his final goodbyes, I think, before they fully cross over. And this is where the iconic wedding scene comes into play.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have you go off on that because I know I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I know you probably remember more than I do because of how much you did.
So the wedding scene is not like what it is in the first film.
Yeah.
It's like a whole spectacle. It turns into a whole deal where you have everyone there. You have influencers, Netflix executives.
Mind you, this is all because of MB coordinating, because Lydia and MB had a conversation about her not wanting the wedding to be a big deal. MB's compromise was just bringing in influencers who have no more than 5 million followers each.
Yeah. You then have Beetlejuice right there, ready to go. And he kind of confronts MB, and we see him hit MB with some truth serum, and then everything comes out. He doesn't have a dead fiance. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He thinks that Lydia's a fraud. He only went to those meetings because he was trying to scope out
a woman that he could easily exploit, and Lydia fit the mold.
Yep. And he only wanted to marry her because he figured he'd make more money as her husband than her manager.
Yeah. So that's all out. Beetlejuice comes into play. And we get the iconic possession moment again, but this time with a different song.
So this song is carried by MacArthur Park by Richard Harris. Famous oldie. And it's beautiful, man. We see everybody. The priest, we see Astrid, we see Delia, who's dead, but still, getting possessed. But
not before all the influencers getting sucked up by their
into
cell
the phones.
And their face being deformed, like how the original couple in the first film did it, to go and scare the deets.
Yes.
That was a callback to that, and I picked up on it so quick, and I loved it. So all the influencers got sucked up in their own phone, which I thought was fucking hilarious.
This scene also showcases Beetlejuice's power a lot. Yeah. Because what people seem to not really remember is that he was very feared. Yep. The first woman from the first film did not want him out. So I like that we got to see that. But again, everyone's possessed. Everyone's doing the shtick to the song. We see wedding cakes. We see fireworks. We see a whole orchestra band.
We see rainfall.
It's a huge spectacle.
Astrid tries to get the handbook for the dead, but Beetlejuice then that's whenever he possesses everybody else that's in the church because he picks up on the fact that she is trying to get the book.
Yes. And he puts her in the red dress from the first film.
Lydia in the red dress from the first film, yeah.
Yeah. Does all that. Willem Dafoe and them show up, and Beetlejuice easily
makes them freeze.
Yeah. Literally. Just takes them out of the picture. Again, showcasing Beetlejuice's power. So you're wondering what's going to happen here. Who's going to stop this? Mm-hmm. Dolores has an objection to this wedding. So Dolores pulls up, immediately just throws Lydia to the side, and she wants Beetlejuice. Yeah. Beetlejuice, which is hilarious because here we are talking about how strong Beetlejuice is, but he's scared of her. Yeah. Which is interesting. So we see Beetlejuice immediately
cower.
But right before he cowers into a little ball, he removes the jacket with his abilities of MB, and it has a shirt that says "I Heart Dolores." Yeah,
yeah. And Dolores just kind of tosses him to the side, and that's, I guess, Beetlejuice and Dolores have this weird square off, but not without everybody else still being semi-possessed, I think.
I believe Jenna, when she takes advantage of the Dolores situation and she's able to break away from his possession, she draws the little square into, I guess, the planet where the sandworm is at. Yeah. Sandworm comes through, staring everybody down, and then immediately goes after what we think is Beetlejuice like last time, but he jumps out of the way, and this time it hits Dolores and MB. So they're out of the picture. They're gone. So what were your thoughts on that? Do you feel like she was wasted as a villain, or do you feel like we weren't supposed to take her seriously?
I don't think we were supposed to take her seriously, because anytime she was walking around, she wasn't really walking, she was floating.
Yeah.
I think she was somebody who Beetlejuice was afraid of, but I don't think it was because of her powers. I think it was because of the fact that he knew that he would die if he got in contact with her permanently. And he seems to want to constantly save his own skin, no matter the cost.
No pun intended on her that, because the way she sucks people out is like...
It's just skin loss.
Just leaves the skin.
Yeah. I didn't intend for that. I apologize, guys. But essentially, like, I don't think she was fully wasted. Could I have learned more? Sure. But I didn't need to either.
You can tell they were testing the waters with Jeremy and with Dolores, because we don't know if they ever want to do a movie 3, if Tim Burton's going to be around to do it, or if Michael Keaton's going to be around to portray Beetlejuice. So I think they were testing the waters there with how a crowd would react to other antagonists versus Beetlejuice.
Within the same realm.
Yeah.
But once Dolores and MB are out of the picture, Beetlejuice once again is the antagonist, and he is trying to seal the deal for the contract. And mind you, the contract doesn't allow for anybody within the Dietz family to say his name, period. So before William Dafoe gets frozen, he calls out that he violated Code 699.
Yeah.
And during the moment where I guess Dolores and MB were about to get sucked up, Astrid had the time to figure out exactly what code Beetlejuice had breached, and she calls it out, causing the contract to be nullified. And Beetlejuice, I think, gets thrown back into the afterlife.
You had Lydia say Beetlejuice 3 times and throws him back into the afterlife.
Delia has to go back into the afterlife as well, but Astrid and Lydia get to walk off living their life the way that they want to.
I don't think that Delia's character had to die.
No.
But again, it goes back to what you and I just said. If they ever want to do a movie 3, all they need to bring back is Winona and Jenna.
Yeah. Because Delia and Charles just kind of meet at the Soul Train and they both go to the Great Beyond. So if they ever want to bring them back, movie 3 would just need for Winona and Jenna or Lydia and Astrid to go to the Great Beyond.
Yeah.
And we'll see them there. We'll see the bottom half of Charles and we'll see Delia there. But Beetlejuice essentially gets like sucked up and out of the way. And once the movie is coming to a close, after this whole exchange, Lydia and Astrid get closer.
They take the trip that Astrid and her dad were supposed to take, where they go visit all the spooky places in the world. So, and
then I guess Astrid finds a boy, like starts dating him. They get married. They have a child, and that child, in the delivering room, ends up being the Beetlejuice baby.
Yeah.
And I start to panic. I'm like, fuck, this is crazy. But then Lydia wakes up.
The dream, I guess.
We come to find out it's a dream. But then the person in the bed with her is Beetlejuice.
I like how he's the one who calls it out. Man, I just had the craziest dream.
And then she wakes up again for the 3rd time. So I guess she had a dream within a dream.
Yeah.
And this time she's in reality. So I guess if they really wanted to bring Beetlejuice back, they could.
We hear the echo of Beetlejuice laughing, though, when she wakes up the 3rd time.
Yeah, so he probably still is able to fuck around with her. And they keep alluding to the fact that a potential sequel could, another sequel, a 3rd movie could come.
They usually do that when they do those fake outs at the end, that they're indicating they want to work on something else.
Mm-hmm. So I'll be keeping a lookout. I guess all of us should keep a lookout for a 3rd film. But overall, I thought this sequel of a film was actually really good. I wasn't part of the cult that fully watched Beetlejuice all the time or watched it on repeat or grew up with it, but I do enjoy the first film a lot. I would score it probably like 8.5.
I think 8.5 for me is good too. I feel like just the
second movie, I would say 7.5, 8.
Oh,
I was talking about the first film.
First film? Okay.
Yeah. So that rating for me is very similar, maybe like a point off.
I think the first film for me would be an 8, and then this one would be 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that stops this movie from being a 9 for me is the
chaos around the middle and end.
Yeah, I think there was too much going on with Delia passing.
Yeah.
And then I also think that for this being marketed as a comedic horror film, I don't think it was that funny.
Yeah.
So
it had its moments, don't get me wrong, but maybe it was just that you and I were a little bit tired. And I did mention this earlier. I have noticed, at least with Tim Burton films, the more I watch it, the more love I grow for these films. So if anything, maybe a second or a third watch will have us actually laughing at the parts that we're supposed to laugh at.
Yeah. I'm definitely like picking this up when it comes out, though.
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna look out for like a bundle with the Beetlejuice and Beetlejuice 2.
For sure, because I like it. Anytime Halloween time comes around, Beetlejuice is very, very close by and like associated with Halloween too. Not just because of the timeline of the second film, but also just in general, the vibes and the energy that it gives off. So it's definitely a classic. It's definitely a film that I watch around this time of year a lot, along with Coraline. So definitely will grab the digital copy whenever it comes out.
But let us know what you think down below about
Yes, please.
Beetlejuice. If you liked it more than the first one, go ahead and let us know. I'll probably put a poll up asking your thoughts on this film and what you would rate it. But let us know what you think about this sequel to a Tim Burton classic. Anyways, this has been Slashers in Sync, and we will talk to you guys next time.
See ya.